everyone, I'm Chelsea.
I'm Felicia.
I'm Nathania.
I am Terrence.
So have you ever wondered how companies level up and stay competitive? Well, one reason for that are mergers and other forms of corporate restructuring. Today, through this video, we're going to explain to you why companies undergo these processes and how they're executed. So without further ado, let's just get right into this video.
So, before we get deeper, let's start with some definitions. First, we got corporate restructuring. Corporate restructuring is an effort to improve and maximize the performance of a company, including rearranging ownership, operational systems, or the company's legal or financial system. The aim of corporate restructuring is to make the company's organizational structure more appropriate to current or future needs. The second is merger. A merger is an agreement between two existing companies to unite and form a single new company. The primary objectives of mergers include expanding a company's reach, entering new markets, gaining market share, reducing operational costs, and increasing shareholders' value. Next is synergy. Synergy is a concept that the value and performance of two companies combined will be greater than the sum of separate individual parts. The goal of synergy is to improve the company's financial performance for shareholders. Last definition is economies of scale. Economies of scale are cost-advantaged companies experience when production becomes efficient, as costs can be spread over a larger amount of goods. Economies of scale occur when the long-run average cost decreases as the total production of a company increases. Now move on to the source of value. Sales enhancement and operating economies are strategies that companies use to improve their sales performance and reduce costs. Sales enhancement refers to strategies that improve the operational capabilities of customer-facing organizations, covering all stages of the go-to-market efforts. These strategies can include operational excellence, mergers and acquisitions, market expansion, and new business model expansion. Operating economies, on the other hand, focus on reducing costs through operational improvements, such as increased efficiency, spreading fixed costs, and bulk purchasing. Improved management. Improved management refers to enhancement of management practices, skills, and strategies to improve the performance of an organization. Information effect. Disastrous announcements can signal positive changes in investment strategy or operating efficiency, potentially boosting share price. However, if seen as a sale of a valuable subsidiary to other advertisers, it can negatively impact share price. Management often believes that the company is undervalued and may process unreflected information in the marketplace. Another reason for shareholder wealth to change is wealth transfer from shareholders to debt holders and vice versa. Any action that reduces the riskiness of cash flows, such as merger, may result in a wealth transfer from equity holders and debt holders. For tax reasons, a motivation is some mergers is a lower tax bill. By merging with a profitable company, it may be possible for surviving company to more effectively utilize the carry forward. 6 is leverage gains. Leverage gains refers to the potential increases in returns that can be achieved by using borrowed money to invest in an asset or investment vehicle. 7th, hybrid hypothesis. The hybrid hypothesis suggests that the excess premium paid for the target company benefits the acquired from shareholders, but that shareholders of the current company suffer a decrease in wealth. 8 is management personal agenda. Management's personal agenda refers to the individual goals, objectives, and priorities that management may have in addition to the company's overall goals.
Now, on to corporate acquisitions. When one company buys another company, it can happen for different reasons. First off, there are strategic acquisitions. Imagine a company wants to expand its operations or enter a new market. In that case, they might buy a company that aligns with their long-term goals. On the flip side, financial acquisition occurs when investment companies or private equity groups buys companies with the aim of making them more profitable by cutting costs and optimizing their assets. Now, when a company is thinking of buying another, there are a few things that they might have to consider. One big factor is how the acquisition will affect their future earnings. Sometimes, right after buying another company, their earnings per share will drop a bit, but they're looking at the bigger picture, anticipating growth in the future by combining forces with the company that they're buying. Another important thing to consider is the market price ratio. Now this is where things get interesting. When a company wants to buy another, they often have to pay a premium, offering more than the current market price of the target company's shares to entice shareholders to sell. Now let's talk about what happens after the deal is done. Studies have shown that usually when a company is bought, its shareholders usually make some money. That's because the buying company usually pays a premium to take over. But for the company doing the buying, it's a bit more complicated. Sometimes, their shareholders see a boost in their shares, but other times, they might not see much change at all, or even sometimes lose money. It depends on a lot of factors, like how well the company works together after the acquisition, and whether or not they can make the deal worth it in the long run. Now here's another interesting fact. There's this trend called roll-up strategies that's gaining traction, especially in industries with lots of small companies. Now imagine you have a bunch of small companies doing similar things. A roll-up strategy involves buying a bunch of these small companies and combining them into one bigger and more powerful company. This can lead to saving on things like buying supplies in bulk and having a more streamlined operation. And guess what? Some of these roll-up companies even decide to go public through an initial public offering or an IPO. That means they start selling shares of their company to the stock market to raise even more money and grow faster.
Acquisition can be treated as another aspect of capital budgeting project. Similar to other capital budgeting projects, acquisition also has an initial outlay and expected future benefits. Different from other types of projects, however, the initial outlay of acquisition is subjected to bargaining in order to acquire the company. In order to evaluate whether the acquisition is prospective or not, one way to do so is that the buying company will have to estimate the future cash flow that the acquisition is expected to add after taxes. The future cash flows here refer to the cash flows that remain after we subtract from expected revenues, operating costs, and the investment necessary to sustain and improve the cash flow themselves. This is what we call as free cash flows. The estimation of free cash flow should include consideration of synergistic effects. Acquisition using cash is simple enough. Assuming there are no liabilities, we will just need to calculate the present value of the free cash flows. A prospective project needs to have excess present value expected cash flows, more than the acquisition cost. However, the payment of acquisition does not necessarily have to be in cash, as it may involve common stocks, preferred stocks, debt, or some combination of these items. Moreover, the buyer in many cases assumes the liabilities of the company it acquires. To evaluate the acquisition, the present value of the free cash flows that we have calculated will represent the maximum cash equivalent price to be paid. Payment other than cash will have to be converted to their cash equivalent market value. The liabilities assumed by the buyer is to be converted to their market value and subtracted from the cash equivalent price. Another way to evaluate whether the acquisition is prospective or not is by earnings per share approach. Different from previously, which considers the present value of the free cash flows, earnings per share approach considers whether there will be an improvement in earnings per share now or in the future. Another difference is that earnings per share approach focuses on the short run, while cash flow approach looks over the long run. At the end of the negotiations, both parties will close the deal. Closing the deal means three things. 1. The acquirer evaluates many facets of a target company. 2. Terms are agreed on, ratified by the respective boards, and approved by the common shareholders of both companies. And finally, 3. Filing the necessary papers. However, one hurdle remains: the possibility that the competition in the industries may be restrained. The government will stop merger attempts with that reasoning. So most companies want to be reasonably sure that they will not be challenged before going ahead with the merger. Similar to other types of sales or purchases, when closing the deal, we will need to consider taxable transactions. If the acquisition is made with cash or debt instruments, the transaction is taxable to the selling company or to its shareholders at that time, which means that they must recognize any capital gain or losses at the time of the sale. On the other hand, if payment is made with voting preferred or common stock, the transaction is not taxable at the time of the sale and is only recognized as capital gain or losses when the newly received common stock is eventually sold.
Next, let's move on to takeovers, tender offers, and defenses. In acquisition scenarios, negotiations usually occur between the managements and boards of directors of the involved companies. However, an acquiring company can bypass this process by making a direct tender offer to the shareholders of the targeted company. A tender offer is an invitation to shareholders to sell their shares at a predetermined price, usually higher than the current market price as an incentive. Sometimes, a bidder may also use a two-tier tender offer. In the two-tier tender offer, the first tier aims to secure control by offering a more attractive price or form of payment than the second tier offer for the remaining shares. This structure encourages early tendering and avoids the free rider problem. Of course, the targeted company here can employ defensive measures, such as persuading shareholders that the offer undervalues the company, or seeking a merger with a friendly company known as a white knight. However, most companies actually have anti-takeover devices. These are formal measures that are put into place prior to an actual takeover attempt, which are aimed to make a takeover more challenging. Some common anti-takeover devices include the following. First, fair merger price provision. This provision ensures that if a company is being acquired, the acquiring company must offer a minimum price per share, often based on the company's earnings. Second, leverage recapitalization. This involves loading the balance sheet with debt and use the proceeds to pay a huge one-time cash dividend to shareholders to discourage acquisition by limiting the acquirer's ability to borrow against the firm's assets. Third, the poison pill provision. This strategy allows existing shareholders to purchase additional shares at a discounted price if an outside party tries to acquire a large portion of the company's stock. Fourth, standstill agreement. This is a voluntary agreement where a big shareholder promises not to buy more of the shares for a certain period, which can help prevent a hostile takeover. And lastly, premium buyback offer or green mail. In this tactic, the company buys back its stock from a potential acquirer at a higher price than the market price, making it less attractive for them to continue with the takeover attempt. Next, let's move on to strategic alliances. Strategic alliances are agreements between independent firms to cooperate and achieve specific commercial goals. They are alternatives to direct investment or acquisition when resources are limited. These alliances can take various forms and involve different partners, such as suppliers and customers, competitors, or non-competitors with complementary strengths. Joint ventures are a type of strategic alliance, where two or more firms collaborate to establish a new business entity to meet specific objectives. We also have virtual corporations. Virtual corporations are a result of extensive outsourcing, where firms focus on core competencies and outsource other functions. This approach allows virtual corporations to avoid over-investing in non-core activities. Next, let's move on to divestiture. In corporate restructurings, companies may also choose to undergo divestitures. Divestitures can take various forms such as the following. Firstly, in a voluntary corporate liquidation, a firm may sell its assets individually to maximize value for shareholders. Second, they can also choose to do partial sell-offs, which involves selling only part of the company, usually for cash or securities. Third, companies may also decide on a spin-off, which involves divesting a business unit as a separate entity, distributing its stock to shareholders, which allows the unit to operate independently. Finally, equity carve-outs may also be a viable option. This measure involves selling a minority stake in a subsidiary to the public while the parent company retains control.
Other corporate restructurings are designed to change the ownership structure of a company. One of such is to go private. Going private simply means transforming a company whose stock is publicly held into a private one. In this ownership change, a variety of vehicles are used to buy out the public shareholders. The most common one includes paying them in cash and merging the company into a shell corporation owned solely by a private investor management group. Rather than being treated as a merger, however, the transaction may be treated as an asset sale to the private group.
In the last topic, we got a leverage buyout. A leverage buyout is a transaction in which a company is acquired using a significant amount of borrowed funds, typically in the form of debt. The assets of the company being acquired are often used as collateral for the loans, along with the assets of the acquiring company. Leverage buyouts are typically conducted to take a public company private, spin off a portion of an existing business, or transfer private properties. The purpose of leverage buyout is to allow companies to make a large acquisition without committing a lot of capital. They are structured to have a high debt to equity ratio, often around 90% debt to 10% equity.
And that concludes today's presentation. Thank you for watching.